Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for coming to our webinar today on understanding your electricity bill rates and usage. I know it's a hot topic. I know it's lots of question marks that always come around when we talk about stuff like this. So by all means, use the Q&A to put some questions in. We'll kind of run through the whole presentation here, and we'll try to answer the questions at the end. I'm sure there'll be a lot of commonalities. So just to help the flow, we'll save all the questions to the end. So, welcome. Chris and Andrew, Chris and I are running today's webinar on here, and we have our special guest, Justin Ali. He's a billing supervisor here at Enova. He's going to be explaining kind of how the bill works and the rates that are applied to it. And then afterwards, we're going to hear from Eric Frappier at Utilismart. Utilismart Settlement Manager is a slick way of kind of accessing your data, seeing your demand and your usage, and he's going to kind of give you the a run through of that portal and how to best make use of it. And then, like I said, we're going to kind of leave the last little bit here for questions, and so just plug them in the chat as you go along here. So if you don't know, Enova was formed September 1st, 2022. It was a merger between Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro and Marler North Hydro. We have a large service territory now. We're the 7th largest utility in the province. But what you really need to know is where we are. We came a long way. Before we used to just provide you electricity, and that was it. Save on Energy came around, and then Chris and I were out visiting you and finding ways for you to save energy and put some incentive applications through. But really now and going forward, we're becoming the strategic business partner for you. We want to be, we're looking out for your best interests and trying to find opportunities where we can collaborate together and make it a win-win situation for both of us. But ultimately, we want to be the smart friend you can rely on. So a couple of friends here at Enova, myself and Chris, been around for more than a decade in the utility. Treat us as your single point of contact. We can easily stick handle your request or any kind of question you might have, and so your starting point should always kind of be Chris and I here. And things that we can do for you, and what reliable friends do. And by all means, Chris, chime in here. I don't want to take the spotlight. But yeah, maybe Chris, you can kind of summarize this slide.
Well, what reliable friends do. I mean, we're trying to be your voice within Enova. We're trying to be your partner that you can rely on. We're going to continue with CDM or save on energy conservation things. So we're always here to help you with your decarbonization targets and everything else. Helps bring in the right people for the right projects. Give our advice, our 2 cents worth, and help guide through the whole energy transition, through the EV storage, the DERs, a bit about everything. So basically we want to be the catch-all. Any type of project, any type of even ideas, just come to us, talk to us, and we'll start vetting it, or we'll start bringing it through the whole Enova company to see if it's viable, to see if it's something we can work together on.
Right. Yeah, and we're vendor agnostic. We're really unbiased. We're here just for your best interest here. Hence why we're throwing on these webinars to help you guys understand how everything works. So with that, let's jump right in to our first presenter, Justin Ali. Take it away, Justin.
Thanks, Andrew. I will see if I can take over the screen sharing here. Share my slides. Okay, is that visible to everyone?
Yep.
Great. All right, so just kind of diving right in, starting with the basics here. So Enova kind of divides its customer base into what we call rate classes. They're essentially just different ways for us to bill our rates. The main ways are we have our residential group, we have our small commercial, small business rate class that we refer to as GS less than 50 kilowatts or general service less than 50 kilowatts. And then we have our large commercial and industrial rate class general service greater than 50 kilowatts. So this is really the one that we're going to focus on for today's, for my portion of the presentation today. So let's dive right in. So these customers, general service greater than 50 kilowatts, they're characterized by having a demand that's greater than 50 kilowatts, but no more than 5,000 kilowatts. Any more than 5,000 kilowatts, and you get bumped into another rate class called a large user. The large user rate class does have some similarities to this, but again, we'll be focusing on this one for today. These accounts, they're general service, so they are non-residential accounts. They might also be referred to as Class A and Class B customers. Some of you might be familiar with this terminology already. Class A meaning that you pay something called global adjustment on your bill based on your peak demand factor. Class B, sort of everyone else who pays global adjustment based on their consumption and the monthly posted rate. These GS greater than 50 kilowatt customers can also be interval metered or non-interval metered. That's just about the period of time that we would, it just means the period of time that we might measure your consumption or your demand. And then finally, you'd be billed based on your demand and your consumption, which is different to, let's say, a small commercial customer that might only be billed based on consumption alone. So moving into the invoice. So this slide kind of looks a little bit scary, but these are two different invoices that I'm presenting here. So as you know, Enova was made up of both Waterloo and Kitchener service territory. So the bill on the left kind of represents a bill that a customer in the Waterloo, Woolwich, and Wellesley service territory might see. The one on the right kind of represents any customers in the city of Kitchener and the township of Wilmot. That's the bill that they would see. Until, of course, we merge systems and everyone's bill's going to look similar to the one on the right. So I'm just going to quickly go through some of the sections here on the bill, starting with the actual commodity of electricity. So these are just two line items for the commodity of electricity based on the hourly Ontario energy price, which I'll talk about a bit later, as well as a charge called global adjustment. Again, I'll talk about that a bit later. The key difference between both of these bills you'll see is that on the bill on the left, we've sort of consolidated a lot of the items to simplify what the bill looks like, whereas the bill on the right provides a little bit more detail and breaks out some of the charges. It doesn't break them out completely. There's still some consolidation here, but you get a little bit more detail. The stuff that I've highlighted in red represents the delivery portion of the bill. So that might include your demand charges that I previously talked about, and I'll get more into that later on. And then finally, you have your regulatory charges, which again consolidated here on the Waterloo bill, but it's made up of these charges here, as you can see. So other elements that might be useful for you to know, your consumption kilowatt hours, these can be found on the second page of your bill. You can also find information about what demand we billed you. Again, the stuff in red here. So you have your measured demand and your bill demand, and I'll talk about that later on as well. So just to kind of quickly go over some key concepts. So consumption, we measure that in kilowatt hours. It's simply just the energy used over a period of time. Your meters can be read every 5, 50, or 60 minutes. This is actually useful for the larger customers in particular who want to have a bit more granularity in how they're actually using energy over a 5-minute period or a 15-minute period, and they can make sort of those tweaks to their operation to save money on their bill. On the demand side, there's a couple elements there. So the first being the kilowatts. This is sort of the real or working power in an electrical circuit. It's really the power that you as the customer can make use of. It's really the maximum amount of power that you might require at any point in time. And again, this can be measured in certain intervals. So typically we will take Your meter will take 3 50-minute intervals and average that up into what we call a 15-minute demand interval. And we'll look at all of the 15-minute demand intervals for our bill period to determine what the highest kW value is that we bill you based on. The other aspect of demand is something called kVA or kilovolt amps. This is the apparent or total power in an electrical circuit. So where this is like the total amount of power that you required from Enova, the demand or kW is how much of that total power that you were actually able to make use of during your operations. So if there's a difference between those two values, it means that there's some energy being wasted, which is kind of a good segue into the next point, which is your power factor, and it kind of measures how efficiently you're actually using the power that we deliver to you. So simply put, it's the ratio of the real power that you're using to the apparent or the total power that you're using. So that's your kW, your kilowatts, divided by the kVA, and there's a threshold for how we might determine your bill. So let's say we measured you consuming 100 kVA, and we also measured you using 95 kilowatts. Your power factor in that scenario is going to be above the 90% threshold that we've set, and we will bill you just solely based on the 95 kilowatts. In another scenario, if you're measured to be using 100 kVA again, but you only were measured as using 70 kilowatts, that means your ratio is below that 90% threshold. So in that scenario, we'll bill you on the 90% of the kVA, which is going to be higher than that 70 kilowatts. So there's some inefficiency there that you're paying for on your bill. So this diagram, it also looks a little bit scary, but it's just like another concept that I kind of want to quickly go over. So this is what I'm going to get into is our primary metering allowance for transformer losses. So in a normal customer setup, you have the generation of power. It gets transmitted over our transmission lines, sent to Enova. There's some stepping down of this high voltage here before it goes into our distribution system. And then eventually it goes to a transformer again that we as Enova may own, and then it goes to your home or business. During that process of coming from Enova through our distribution system, we account for something called losses, because energy gets lost as heat during that whole process. The main thing I want to draw your attention to in this is that the transformer here is located before the meter. So in the next slide here, the difference is that the transformer is located after the meter. And in most of the cases, if not all, if the transformer is located after the meter, it means that you as the customer likely owns that transformer. So some differences here is that instead of in the previous example where there was a 3.5% loss measure that we've assigned as a loss factor, here we're saying it's between 2.26 and 2.5% of losses. That range is just accounting for the difference between the Kitchener rates and the Waterloo rates. But essentially, if that transformer is located after the meter, we have something that called a primary metering allowance, where we will actually bill you for less of the kilowatt hours and less of the kilowatts that you use. So around 98 to 99% of the kW or kVA or kilowatt hours that you are using. So I'll illustrate that a bit better later on. But the next thing I want to get into is your consumption charges. So the first line item on your bill is going to be something called the hourly Ontario energy price, or HOPE. This HOPE price fluctuates throughout the day based on grid needs. So if there's low demand in the grid, there's going to be a lower cost of supply. The reverse is true. If there's high demand, we're going to use higher cost of supply. The other piece of this that I want to mention that maybe not everyone knows is that Enova and all the other utilities in the province, we don't actually make any money off of this electricity price or any any of the electricity commodity, we make zero money on that. We simply just collect the money from you on your bill and pass that through to the IESO. The IESO being the Independent Electricity System Operator. Their mandate is to operate the electricity market and ensure that we have a reliable supply of electricity in the whole province of Ontario. So they actually come up with this hourly price through forecasts, accepting supplier bids. They usually try to accept the lowest cost bids before moving to the highest cost. And every time they do that, it sets a new price for electricity. So every hour there's a different price for electricity based on the grid needs and based on the supplier bidding for provision of that power. This little table that I've taken a snapshot of is actually from the Utilismart portal. So trying not to steal too much of Eric's thunder here, but just to kind of illustrate a little bit how this works. So what I'm showing here is, this is every day in December. I've consolidated it here, but December 29th, this customer used 3,078 kilowatt hours. And Utilismart has actually averaged every hour of pricing for the 29th into this 0.002449 value. And then again, they do that for all the days in the month, and it comes up with this 0.053581 for that particular month. So this value is actually the rate that the customer would be billed on over here. So if any of you have a calculator handy, you can do this yourself. If you were to divide this 14,252 by this 266,000 kilowatt hours, you would get that 0.053581 value. Sorry, my mouse is kind of lagging here. Pointer's not doing well. The other element that I want to mention here, so you'll notice that on the bottom here, it shows the measured consumption as 269,000, whereas we bill them on 266,000 kilowatt hours. So this difference actually goes back to what I was talking about with the primary metering allowance. So this customer owns their transformer. It's located after the meter, so they get that discount on their consumption as well as their demand. So you can see on the right here, the primary meter consumption. We'll put a line item here that says it's 266,010 kilowatt hours. The other piece that I want to move on to here is the line losses. So again, like I mentioned, energy gets lost when we deliver power to your home or to your business. And so we account for that on your bill. And the way we do that is we take your measured consumption, accounting for the primary metering discount, and then we multiply that value by the hourly Ontario energy price. So that forms half of the line loss adjustment. And then the other half would be taking that loss adjusted kilowatt hours and multiplying that by the posted global adjustment rate, which you can see here. So as we're talking about global adjustment, all electricity customers in the province pay this thing called global adjustment, whether you're residential, or if you're with a retailer, or if you pay the hourly price, HOPE. GA is just another component that forms the total cost of electricity in the province. It does have a relationship with HOPE where it fluctuates with changes in HOPE. So if HOPE is high, global adjustment tends to be low, and if HOPE is low, global adjustment will be high. So global adjustment, the purpose of it is really to help cover the cost of new infrastructure in the province. It also pays for conservation programs. So you're actually paying into this fund, and if you are looking to recoup some of the money that you pay into this fund, you should participate in some conservation programs because you would actually benefit from the money that you've invested in there. And the last thing is that it's helping to refurbish existing generation. So I mentioned already about how Class A customers pay GA based on their peak demand factor, and Class B customers will pay GA based on their monthly consumption and this posted rate. And RPP customers, or regulated price plan customers, which are your small commercial and your residential customers, they pay global adjustment, but it's already factored into the OEB rates. So you're all familiar with time of use, the ultra low overnight or the tiered rates. Global adjustments already factored in there. It's just made into sort of a fixed rate to make it simpler for those customers to pay their bills. The other element here of global adjustment is a disposition of global adjustment. So when we bill customers on global adjustment, we bill them on the first estimate of global adjustment for the month. At the end of the month, the utility settles costs of electricity with the IESO on the actual cost of global adjustment. So there's a little bit of a difference between that first estimate and the actual cost. And so this variance gets disposed of as a charge or credit on your bill. So currently, this 0.001 cent is the variance that was calculated for 2023. So we're trying to dispose of that variance in 2024. So moving on to demand charges. So there's measured demand, there's bill demand. Put simply, your measured demand is just your raw, unadjusted demand that we measure from your meter. The bill demand is going to have some adjustments based on a couple of things. So one being the power factor that we discussed. Might also be because you have your own transformer located after your meter, so you get an allowance there. So I've kind of gone through that calculation already. And then the other element here is this transmission network peak demand occurrence. So most demand charges on your bill would be based on what we call a 24-hour demand. So if your demand is high at 3 a.m. for some reason, because you have a production shift running at that point in time, you'll see that value reflected in things like your distribution charge and the transmission connection charge, for example. But this transmission network peak demand occurrence, if your peak is occurring between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., your demand value could be different. So this particular customer has a low demand during that 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so as you can see, their demand, their kilowatt for that period is only 69 kilowatts. More on demand charges. So there are a couple of them that make up all the charges that we would bill you for demand. So we have our distribution charge, which is a consolidation of a few different rates in our rate order. The first being our distribution volumetric rate, makes up roughly 78% of that, $6.34. That is actually utility revenue, but it's not just a number that we can make up and charge you. The OEB has to approve that number for us. And we have to prove it by saying that we need it for key aspects of our operations. So infrastructure, engineering, customer service, things like that. That's what it helps pay for. The other 22% of that distribution charge would be what we call rate riders. So like I mentioned before, there's variances between what we charge you as a customer and what we are paying the IESO back. So if there's variances between that, rate riders could either be a charge or a credit, and it's built into this distribution charge. Additional rates that we have here are our network service rate, related to operations with our poles and wires, and our line and transformation connection service rate, which is for stepping down our high voltage to low voltage. Getting close to the end here. So other items on your bill, we have our monthly service charge. So whereas the distribution charges are variable based on your usage or demand rather, the monthly service charge is fixed. It is utility revenue. That is also OEB regulated. So again, we can't just make up that number. Customer owned transformer allowance. So like I mentioned before, if a customer owns their own transformer, let's say it was located before the meter, they would just get this transformer allowance. They would also get it if it's located after the meter as well. But if it's located before the meter and they own the transformer, they would not get the primary metering allowance that we talked about. And then of course, the regulatory charges, like I mentioned, say wholesale market services, standard supply admin fee, those charges they pay for the administration, sort of the wholesale market and how the ISO runs, I guess, the market with suppliers and contracts and stuff like that. So that's pretty much all I had to cover. I know it's a bit of I kind of ran through a lot of these pretty quickly, but happy to answer questions maybe at closer to the end of the presentation. I think at this point, I'll pass it over to back to Andrew, I guess. I think you're muted.
And yeah.
Thank you, guys. All right, thanks, Justin. And thank you for that riveting explanation of our utility bill and rates and all that wonderful stuff. Surprisingly, I learned a few things there just from listening to you. So thanks for that. I hope everybody took some good notes. There will be a test at the end. No, I'm just kidding. But we will be sending out this slide and everything to everyone here and those that weren't able to attend today too. So you'll have it to refer to. So without further ado, Justin kind of alluded to Utilismart, and Eric's happy to join us today and kind of give you a run through of the settlement manager portal. So take it away, Eric.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Okay, yep, I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, so I know that Justin kind of showed one of his slides, one of the reports we'll be looking at today, but right here on my screen is what you kind of see as the settlement manager, the customer facing portal. So I'm going to go through some of the things, kind of quickly go through some of the reports and see what you guys would be able to see. So this is always the landing page, and you kind of, once you log into it, you get to this landing page here. You start on the dashboard, which I'm going to skip because that's going to make a little more sense after I go through some of the reports and what you can do within this dashboard. So we'll skip that for now, but this would kind of be the landing page, and you'll be able to see a lot of things kind of at first glance. So this is kind of just an account that I've kind of created for myself. You see that none of the information is real and has some older data, but you click here on select facility, and this is allowing you to select which account or meter you want to look at. So I here have access to one account. So if your account has multiple meters on it, you'd be able to see both here. But if you only have one account, obviously you don't have access to that. So you can kind of click on it, and we can see that I've selected the facility, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, test Eric. And now that we've selected that, we can now look at all these individual reports specifically for this meter. So if we go back here on the left, there's meter data. And these are kind of some of the reports we're going to look at. I'm going to start with the consumption profile, kind of start from the top here. So it always defaults to what's going to be the most recent month that we have data for. So in this case, as I said, the data that I have is from March 2023 in this account. And it defaults to this view. So every single kind of report, just so you guys know, has this little reports option button, and it's going to bring down all the different things you can do on this report. So I'll quickly go over these just on the first report, so you guys have an idea. And these options are relatively the same across all of our different reports. So you can select the month that you want to look at data for. You can select if you want to look at a daily view. Some have that option in a graph or a table, monthly graph or table. And then over here, we have if you want to download it to an Excel spreadsheet. Some people find that a lot easier if they don't want to look at it visually. Print it if that's what you want to do. And then the last one is kind of a help option. And this is kind of something that we've created for people to kind of go in and say, okay, cool, you have this consumption report. What am I kind of looking at? So this is kind of a brief explanation of what the report does, all the different columns, and some of the information on what you're looking at. So if you ever have questions about any of the reports, this is a good place to start. Oops. But I'll kind of go back. So consumption profiles, what this is this is looking at your consumption. And the first thing we see here on the left is obviously the axis, which has the energy in kilowatt hours, kWh. And then it's defaulting to the monthly view. So we can see every day how much usage was used by this account. And then we can see both how much of it was on and off peak. And in this specific account that I'm looking at, that's looking at that 7 to 7 on and off for this type of pricing. So the first option we have is to view it as a graph where we have it color coded off and on peak. We can obviously see that whatever facility here doesn't do a lot on weekends. And this is kind of a nice thing to look at when you want to see your consumption, if it's kind of what you expect. So whatever, you know, my test business here, obviously I'm seeing that it's, you know, Monday to Friday, pretty consistent usage throughout the month, regardless of the day. I'm not seeing any weird spikes or I'm like, wow, Fridays we're using way more energy for some reason. And I'm also saying we're not operating on the weekends, so I can see here that it does go down. So I feel like the monthly view is really good to kind of look at throughout the month any kind of wows or dips that you're not expecting. If you prefer to look at it at a table view, this is the exact same information here, but in a graph. So we have the on peak for kilowatts, the off peak total kilowatts used. It breaks it out to every single day. So if you want to take a look, we can see, you know, the max demand and the total kilowatts for every day here, just a different view. And then we have this nice chart that says, you know, this data we're looking at. So Justin talked a little bit about losses. So this data we're looking at is without losses. And we can also see here, so when we're looking at the on peak and off peak, this kind of just summarizes it. So you don't have to, you know, kind of download it and use Excel to do the math. So we get to see when the max demand and the peaks are and timing. So that's always nice to see if this is a date or time you're not really expecting, or you're saying, man, on the 29th, I don't remember doing anything out of the ordinary, or, you know, on the 2nd of the month, I remember using lots of power. Maybe this is a good place to kind of see some of this information here. There's a little bit more granularity that we can see. So we can see these same reports on a daily basis. So I can select any kind of day and say, okay, we can see here that, you know, we have the off peak up to 7, and then the on peak, and same idea here where, you know, it does look like this, you know, operates almost 24 hours, a little bit more during business hours, but it's kind of really the same on Monday to Friday. And then I could do the same thing. What am I doing on the weekend? Okay, it looks like I'm still using power, but I can see here that it's at 300 kilowatts, whereas on a weekday it was at 1500. So yeah, that lines up, and you can see here, obviously weekends are all off peak. So once again, same idea. If there's a specific time where you're like, you know, machines are starting, if you have like a Frappier or something, like I'm expecting the power to be a little bit higher on startup and things like that. This is all really good to see what hours the consumption that you have is. And then same exact idea as the monthly view, but now we're looking at the specific date range we've selected here, but just each hour. And it's giving us on this day those exact same stats that we were looking at in terms of the on peak and the energy used. Once again, this data is without losses. So this is really good to kind of look at your consumption. And then I mostly start with the monthly view. I think that this is kind of the most vital one. Just maybe my personal favorite view, just to kind of see trends, because this is really where I think people would look to see if there's anything unexpected, and then dig into the daily if there's anything weird. So I think that that's kind of super interesting, and it helps you kind of identify trends within your business if there's something that you are looking to change. So if there was more data, I can select this for back is available. So if my account has data a year back, it's available as well. So I just loaded 3 months for display purposes. We'll kind of move on to the next one. I'm going to skip down just to demand profile because it kind of makes the most sense to look after this one. So demand profile is very similar. This one defaults per day. I once again prefer the monthly view. And it's the same idea, but now we're looking at demand. So now we can see here that throughout the month, every day, what our demand profile looks like, which is a little bit different, as Justin explained, than the consumption. And we can see here where we have the KW, KVA, and KVAR, which is reactive, which is kind of like that lost power that Justin was talking about. So we can see here how efficient the power is, what the demands are, what the values are. And this is kind of the power factor as well. So we can see here that this is 94.8% and things like that. So this is really good to see how efficient the power you're using is. So once again, this one doesn't have a table for this view at a monthly level. And that's just because there's usually significantly more data, which I'll show you in a minute. And once again, here you can see a few different highlighted. You could always remove the channels if you're like, I only care about KW. And then it'll show you kind of the peaks. So we can see all of the peaks are right here. and just a graphic representation. And once again, same idea where I'm expecting this, weekends, it's going down. It matches the consumption, obviously, but another place where I can kind of see those values. So daily, same idea. The 18th does look very exciting, but the 5th, this is exactly what we're seeing here. We can see, the power factor. We can see where it was kind of the best and the highest down here, and then we can see all the peaks and the different demand values here. And then this is where we get to see it a little bit different. We can see here that it's 5 minutes. This meter is a 5-minute metering. We could see the kW, the kbar, kVA, and the power factor for every interval. So this is just a more granular way to look at it. In most cases, once again, start with the monthly view, see if there's anything kind of unexpected or weird, or if you're looking for a specific trend, this is your place to look for demand trends. And then if you need to look specifically at a different day, either graphically or on the table, you could dig into one specific day. And once again, exports, prints, and then requests for help. So the other thing that's kind of interesting is data download. So this feature, not really anything exciting, but allows you to download the data in a CSV. You could do the consumption or the demand profile. We can see here that it's going to show you how much data is available on your account, and then you could download it. So that is just a CSV representation of the data. And I believe that in most cases, it's the consumption profile will look at it at an hourly level, and the demand profile will look at the demand levels, so the 5-minute, I believe. So that's just, once again, it's just another way, because sometimes when you're looking at one specific month, you don't want to download 12 from the demand and the consumption profile and try to merge them together in Excel. This is an opportunity. You can do up to 2 years at a time. So if you're looking at a trend over a year or multiple years, you can do that right in here. After that, there's the cost report, and I think this is the one that Justin was showing. So this is kind of a full thing. So if we're looking at March, we see here that, just so you know, that the daily and monthly graphs are grayed out. It's just because those are options. So we can look at the monthly level every day. And then I know just quickly went over, but exactly, we're looking at the kWh demand, 90% of the kVA, the peaks, and then the actual average weighted price. And this is per day. And that is calculated here for some of the month. So, and that is kind of what we're looking at here. Once again, it's just kind of a graphic representation of it summed up per day. And this might be, if you're looking at average weighted price, if you really want to get down to the granular level, this is the opportunity. And I promise you, it's not super exciting, but sometimes it's nice to have at a granular level to see here. So that's the cost report. Kind of going through here. We also want to take a look at the monthly calendar. So this isn't anything crazy or anything super exciting. It's just another way that we kind of like to visualize things. This one has no options except for choosing the month, kilowatts or megawatts. And it's looking at things like energy without losses is kind of on a daily. So you can kind of look at it and see, like, you can see, obviously the Saturday is much different than the Friday. The measured peak demands for each day. The time of the demand. So this is also kind of nice to see, like, am I seeing, okay, so this demand on this day is the 5, 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, okay, 3, 3, 1. So if you are always wondering, like, man, is there a trend? Is it always at this time that my demand is on every day? And is there something that I want to do about that? This is kind of a good visual representation, pardon me, where you can see all the days in a month together and see the time. So that's interesting. And this load factor is kind of based off of 24 hours. It kind of says it's using 88% of its load per day. It's a bit of a weird calculation. The explanation in here is actually pretty good, where it says it's a 24-hour calculation, and most businesses aren't operating 24 hours. So if you're working, 8 to 5, 5 days a week, you may expect the load factor to be closer to 24%. And this is just a calculation. Kind of says, what is it relatively consistent, which is what you're looking for in most cases, because you don't want it to be load shape to be spiky, as it said here. So that's just another visual representation that is helpful there. And this one, once again, I suggest that most people, when they're looking at it, you really want to look for trends within the time of the peak. This is probably the best way to find that. And ultimately, if you are looking to identify that and make a change, you'll be able to come in here and say, okay, in March 2023, it was all 5 p.m. I was able to shave it and change it to 3 p.m. or whatever you're trying to do. And this is a good representation here. The last one is kind of the peaks report. And this one is a little bit different because it actually just sums up the 10 highest peaks for each unit of measure. So we have KW, KVAR, and KVA. And this one is looked at on a monthly basis as well. So you can come here and say, okay, for my KW, and these usually end up lining up, but not always, as we can see. But what were my top 10 peaks? So we can see here the date and time of the peaks. And so this is kind of like the calendar. The calendar allows you to look at all the days, where here it's only going to be the top 10. So it's going to give you the peak, the power factor for that peak, and then what time. So this obviously we see the same trend as we see in the monthly calendar, that obviously the peaks are generally happening around that same time. But this one allows us to look at the next 20 days. Same thing here for KVAR, and same thing for KVA. So those are kind of all the reports, and it kind of just gives you a little more insight into your power and when and how it's being used. And where I think it gets a little interesting is this dashboard. So there's a few different things that we can do within this dashboard, and I'll quickly touch upon them. Is you could create widgets. You could kind of create a widget on any of the reports that we looked at. So we'll just use the consumption profile for an example. I get to choose the facility that I want. I only have access to one, so I'll click that one. And I could look at it. Let's just say I want to look at previous month. That's not going to help because I don't have actual data do custom. So I want to look at March of 2023. I can create that. And it's going to display right here. Where this kind of becomes interesting, and I won't be able to do it. I should have loaded a little more data. But you can do same month, previous year. So if you do, let's say, you can look at this month, but last year, and you would do something like this to say, okay, I can quickly take a look at the load profile side by side of this facility that I'm selecting. In this case, it's just March and February, but I could even look at that if I want to look at the trend over a few months. And I can see here that, there was actually a little less power used in March than there was in February, solely based off of these numbers. And you also have the ability to, you click on this little expand button and it brings you right to that report for that month. So I can see here looking at February 2023. So I think that's super interesting. So if there is any of these reports where you would be specifically looking at any of the trends, you can look at them at first glance. So especially if you just have kind of one account or one meter you're looking at, you can set up a few of these and really do the same thing with let's say the demand profile. And I can look at the demand profile. So this is all just first glance stuff and allows you to quickly compare side by side. And that's kind of the basics of how you would kind of set that up. And how you would kind of look at it. So for most of all, what I usually recommend is people that are kind of using this portal to start by just kind of looking at the reports manually, seeing the ones they kind of like, see what trends they're interested in looking at, because sometimes people go from not knowing anything of their power and just getting a bill to wanting to see it. So first, kind of get clarity, get in there, and then once you start seeing the reports that are useful, start kind of lining them up on the dashboard, and you can start seeing some trends. So I think that's all that I kind of had. I didn't want to leave a few minutes here for questions for either Justin or myself. So I will stop sharing my screen and allow either let you take control there, Andrew.
Yeah, right on. Great. Thank you, Eric. It was really informative. Again, I learned a few things about that portal that I hadn't known before. Chris and I usually will dig in there. We'll usually download the data, and then we'll use the Excel to come up with kind of a profile and whatnot. But I mean, it's always good to have the visuals right on that dashboard with the widgets and whatnot. So very effective. We're big advocates for monitoring your energy usage. It always tells a story. Usually there's a way to be able to identify issues or a piece of equipment that's running and identifying it soon versus, months down the road when the accounting people come knocking on your door asking, why is our energy bill so high? So at least with this having this data in front of you, you can quickly say, wait a second, we're a bit too heavy today. So let's find out why. Another thing that we can do here is go a little bit further and even create an energy model. So we'll take weather, production data, whatnot, correlate it so that you can kind of predict where your energy is going to go, and then quickly be able to see again, wait a second, we're trending higher than we expected, but we're lower than last week, but oh, wait a second, we're not running this shift this week, that's why we're lower. So we kind of build in some of that intelligence so that you can kind of get a better concept of why your energy is doing what it's doing. So just a little bit of a plug at the end there for you, Eric, or for us. Anyway, so let's open it up for questions here. Does anybody have any questions? I know a little bit of drinking from a fire hose here. And like I said, none of this will be on the test. So feel free to ask questions. Oh, I see one in the Q&A. And let's go to Eric for this one. This is from Eric. Is it possible to have two different meters on the same Utilismart dashboard?
Yeah, Eric. So I guess there's a few different options. Generally, it depends how you kind of want it set up and how it's kind of set up. So you can have as many accounts, obviously, that you're authorized to have. So if you have multiple accounts, they can both be set up. And if it's kind of 2 meters under one account, sometimes we could even create like a virtual point. So we kind of like plug them together. So you're looking at one set of visuals instead of 2. But it kind of depends on the setup. But yes, you can definitely have 2 different meters and 2 different accounts, as long as you're authorized to view those pitches.
Okay, are you able to quickly show like a demo of that on your site there, your demo site? Or I guess you only have the 1 meter, yeah.
Yeah, I only have the 1 meter, but you would kind of have in that facility. Let's say you'd have meter A, meter B, and then we could even set up a virtual one that says meter A plus B. To look at that as well, and it would be all the same visuals. You would just look at the meter together instead of individually.
I
Okay.
also wanted to mention that if anybody wants either Andrew or myself to come out to your facility to walk through the Utilismart portal with you, we're more than happy to meet with you and run through it in a bit more detail.
And bug Eric as necessary.
Yeah.
All right, that was it. I think no other questions. Give it maybe 3 more seconds if anybody wants to chime in here. If not, we'll close up. Oh wait, last one. We got one here. Another question here, guys. Do account holders have the features available from all the features available from Utilismart? So I guess it would be multiple users on the same meter. Am I correct, Eric?
I lost it. Okay. Do account holders have all the features available?
Yeah, like all the consumption profile, the demand profile, everything else. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you everybody for participating today. Thanks again to Justin and Eric for leading us through that all that information. Feel free to reach out to Chris and I after this presentation if you have any further questions. We'll be happy to help you. And like I said, recorded this presentation and the slides will be sent out hopefully next week sometime. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. You now have 5 more minutes to freshen up your coffee before the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Take care.